If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is not about burning cars. This revolution is about building our own cars and selling them to make our own money. Essentially, this revolution is in the mind, because if we are not in charge of our mind, then the one who controls our mind will control our bodies and make us the tools of self-destruction. Peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people from wherever you find yourself, on the continent or in the diaspora. We greet you with our revolutionary greetings by saying peace and love. My name is Kabbalah from the African Continental Unity Party. As you know already, the ACUP or African Continental Unity Party is an emerging movement, actually an emerging force by people's initiatives, by Africans' initiatives. It is not an elite movement, it is the Africans' movement, the only political party or political movement on the continent that is transcending the boundaries. So if you want to know more about the ACUP or you want to join us, please feel free to check the description, the link on the description to join us, because together we have a chance to rebuild Africa as a global power base. Thank you very much for joining us again on our weekly rendezvous where we talk about issues related to African liberation and African emancipation. So essentially issues related to us as African people. And today we are starting a lecture that I'm going to break down in different pieces so that it can accommodate us in terms of our time and occupation. So today I will do introduction. The next week I will do another step, another stage or another step of the lecture, so on and so forth, until we get everything done. So what we want to talk about in this lecture, and I feel is a very important, is about tools. We want to talk about the tools of liberation. Do you want to be free? Do you want to liberate yourself? Or do you want to see Africa liberated? I guess the answer is yes, because it is a desire of all of us as African people to see one day Africa liberated from colonialism, or I should say neo-colonialism, Africa liberated from imperialism, Africa liberated from all kind of isms that are actually keeping us in the condition of subjection where we are today. But the real question is, what are the tools do we have as African people to use or to utilize in order to liberate ourselves? Because one thing we need to understand is there's nothing in this world that you can do without proper tools. There is nothing that you can do without the proper tools. I'm speaking to you right now because I've got some tools that allow me to record the video, to store the video on cloud of course, and then you also have some tools to access the video on cloud that we call YouTube and watch it. So tools are the fundamental of human civilization or of every society, and without the tools there was not going to be a need for us as human beings to build what we call the society. So the tools are very important. So we want Africa to be liberated. We want freedom, of course, is wonderful. So what are the tools have we developed? Have we prepared? Have we intentionally chosen in order to make our liberation no longer just a desire but a reality? And mind you, the tools that we're talking about here are all man-made. We don't talk about some mysterious things or some gifts that we are born with, even though they are very essential. But we're talking about the tools that we as a society, we as African people, come together and devise certain tools, appropriate tools, so that we can use them in acquiring our freedom, in liberating ourselves from the imperialist forces that have been subjecting Africa in all these conditions of precarity. What are the tools do we have at this moment? You see, one of the fundamental things that distinguish human beings from animals is the ability of us as humans to devise tools appropriate to achieve our desires. You see, when you closely look into the animal kingdom, you will see that whenever the land becomes dry, whenever there's no rain, there's no water, what do the animals do? What do? They run away in search for another green pasture to survive. Simply because animals, lions, elephants, giraffes, whatever you call it, they don't have the ability to devise some tools that will help them to manage the environment. That's the reason why they run away to another next available green pasture. However, when it comes to us human beings, we have the capacity to develop tools that can help us to master our environment, so that whenever it's dry, whenever it's wet, we can store water when the rain is there, and then build some reserves of water so that whenever the rain is no longer there, we can rely on that water, I should say. We have the ability to create or to design some tools that can help us to bring water from far distant places into our communities where we are living to survive. So we have that capacity, and that is what actually differentiates us from other animals or other beings outside there. The country that we call today Libya was once a desert, and Muammar Gaddafi took upon himself to create an agricultural and arable land, from a desert. And that was a true demonstration of humans' capacity to use tools in order to master his or her environment. And desert was at some point again a really agricultural land that was producing food that Libyan people wanted, as well as other African people wanted or could rely on. The country that we call today Israel, was at some points a desert. And when the Jewish settled in that country, they also demonstrated a higher level of tools, of designing tools, or a high level of humans' capacity to design or capability to design tools. And they successfully designed those tools which have allowed them to master their environment. And Israel is one of the countries now that are exporting food to other countries in the world. So anything that you want to cook the meal, you need food. You need tools, sorry. You want to travel, you need tools. Anything that you want, there's nothing that you can do in the modern society that is not requiring you to firstly develop or decide what are the tools that you want in order to achieve that you want to achieve. It is the same as us African people. We need to identify. If we cannot identify, then we need to design intentionally the tools with which we are going to reclaim our liberation and our emancipation as African people, the tools with which we are going to take charge of our lives, of our destiny, of our resources, and make sure that before the end of this century, the African child is in charge or is in the driving seat of his own destiny. We need tools. We cannot do that without proper tools. You see, one of the reasons why we are stuck today, or we seem to be stagnant, is simply because we know too much about the reality of the world. We know too much about our enemies. We know too much about the poverty in Africa. We know too much about the resources of Africa. But we have never given ourselves, collectively as African people, the opportunity to study and understand what type of tools are we going to use to liberate Africa, or in reality to liberate ourselves from the imperialist power and oppression that have put us down where we are today. So that's why it is very important that we discuss this lecture, and we'll go step by step discussing various tools for our liberation as African people. I've explained why they are important. You see, all these tools we need to understand. The tools that we are using today are born or were created during a time of difficulty. For Rudolf Chrétien Diesel to come up with the idea or with the invention of a combustion engine, which we call today diesel, he was supposed to be, first of all, observe the difficulty or experience the difficulty that people of his generation were facing about moving, when it comes about moving from one point to another point, or moving their goods and stuff like that. It was difficult. People had to rely on the animal energy, which took more time and more resources in order to travel from point A to point B. And during that difficulty, that's when people got an inspiration on how to come up with a solution that will cut our reliance on animals' energy. And that was the invention of the engine, the combustion engine that we have in our cars. It is the same thing. All the major breakthrough that we have in the world today were born during a time of difficulty, or during a time of a particular challenge that people were facing and had to overcome. Most of technological inventions that we have were born during the time of war. In fact, whether you talk about Google Map, you talk about a lot of things that we have on the phone, all these things were born during the time of war, where people had to think outside the box on what they can do in order to win the war. So during those difficulties, ideas were created, and that's why we have a lot of things today, internet, technology, stuff like that. When you trace the origins, you will find out that they were born all in time of difficulty. It is the same with us as African people today. We are going through so much in terms of difficulties. The resources of Africa are plundered every single day. When you go to Congo, when you go to South Africa, when you go in any country you want to study, you will see that there are resources being taken outside of Africa to go and build the external world. In return, what do we get as African people? We get unemployment, we get poverty, we get hunger, we get malnutrition, we get diseases, and on top of that, we get rejection when we apply for visa to the embassies of those countries that are plundering our resources. And at the end of the day, many of us have to make themselves refugees in those countries by crossing on the Mediterranean waters, some of them with their children, with their baby. Atrocious. Very, very awkward. So this is simply because we have not yet understood that in the midst of this difficulty, we can develop the tools, we can create the tools, and we have the same capacity to do as other people have been doing. You see, nature is just to anybody. When you plant a seed of maize, of mango, or whatever else, you plant it in Nigeria, you plant it in Ghana, you plant it in South Africa, you plant it in America, you plant it in France, you plant it in China, the nature will do its job. The earth will do its task, is to bring those seeds out, to make them growing. As long as water, all the composition of the earth are there. And indeed, you will expect those things to grow. There's nothing like for you to grow mango, you only need to be in America, or you need to be in China, you need to be in England, or in Africa. It doesn't work. No, you plant it in Africa, you plant it in America. It takes exactly the same time that it should take for the seed to grow and to blossom and to start growing up. So this is to say that we have the same capabilities, we have the same capacities, we have the same intellectual, psychological, capabilities to do for ourselves what we have relied on other people to do for us. So the first point to begin with is to begin with the tools, because without the tools we can pray forever, we can do all kind of incantations that we want to do forever, but we're never going to see a result until our prayers, our wishes, our incantations come to meet with the properly designed tools to resolve our problems as African people. That is when we will begin to see the difference taking place in our life. Now, before I end, I need to mention another thing about tools, which is very important. As I said, tools are always designed during the time of difficulties. Now, the second thing is, tools are always designed according to the situation that people are going through. In other words, tools are not statics. They are also, evolving according to the situation that we are going through. So the tools that we have used in the 1960s to gain what is called independence, mostly it was protest, it was marching, it was demanding. Those tools may not be relevant today in the world of artificial intelligence, in the world of of social media, in the world of of globalization. Those tools of 1960s may not be relevant today, and the tools that we can come up with today may not be relevant in the 50 years or 100 years to come. So we need to understand that the tools we're talking about here are first of all man-made. You need to design your tools. As African people, we need to design our own tools, and we need to understand that these tools are always in correlation with the situation that we are going through, with the contemporary situation that we are going through in a society as African people. And we need to be able to understand when these tools become outdated so that we can replace them with other tools. Then the reason I'm saying this is because when we go in Africa, in many countries, you see prayers organized here and there to pray God for Africa. But I just need to tell you that the tools that the Western man has used to build this country were not created by God, were designed by man and made by man purposely for the objective of developing their own countries. So Africa is not exception to that. It's not exception to that. We also have to understand what we have in our mind, which is the desire for freedom and emancipation of Africa, and design appropriate tools to liberate ourselves. Otherwise, as I said, we'll pray forever, we will wish forever, we'll hold and die with our desires without having to see the proper result. You see, as I said, the tools are designed according to the situation. Right now, when we talk right now in Africa, we're talking about the Agenda 63 in Africa, which the African Union has eventually chosen as an objective, collective objective for all of us as African people, which is set at to 29 trillion US dollars, if I'm not mistaken. Agenda 2063. Now, in the course of working to accomplish this agenda, let's say that this is really our agenda and we have tools to achieve the goals of that agenda. In the middle, we then realize that we are faced with imperialism. We are faced with the neocolonialism. We are faced with sanctions. We are faced with a covert war by the West against Africa to keep us in poverty. Automatically, our goals have to change, and immediately our tools need to change to adapt the new situation, which is to get rid of imperialism and neocolonialism. Let me explain this in a way that you can understand. Let's say that you enroll at school for a 4-year university, a 4-year program, university degree. Okay, this 4 years become your goal, become your goal and objective. and you have tools, which is your education, your study, your books and stuff like that, to accomplish your study at the end of your 4-year program and get your qualification. So let's say then in the middle of this period, after 2 years, you get sick, you can't function. Automatically this sickness would change your objectives, would change your goal, because now you need to fight no more to succeed at school, but to recuperate your health, to gain your health, because without your health you won't be able to study or even to succeed. And therefore you're gonna need new tools to then work for the betterment of your health condition. So you're gonna need to find new tools, medicine, medication, or meditation as well, or rest. All these things that the doctors will tell you to do. These things become then the tools that you are using to regain your health, without which you cannot do anything. So we need to understand that currently, no matter what is your objective in your country, I know in South Africa they have Agenda 2030, right, which is about national economic development. In Congo they have their agenda. In Nigeria they have their agenda. Every African country has got its own agenda, which is beautiful. But what is the dominating situation overall of African people? What is the overall dominant situation in Africa? It's imperialism and the oppression of imperialism, which requires that then our immediate goal today collectively as African people is liberation and emancipation. Therefore it is very, very important that we understand this new priority to liberate ourselves and to emancipate ourselves and come up with the tools to achieve that objective of liberation and emancipation. So what are the tools we're talking about? We'll see in the next video. So please, if you like this introduction and you are excited about the following steps in terms of the tools of our liberation, kindly share the video, like the video, subscribe to our channel if you have never done that, because that will encourage us and that will help us a lot. And if you can also assist us, support us in any way as the African Continental Unity Party with your money, your skills, please feel free to reach out to us and assist us, because we need money. We need money to make our propaganda powerful and dominant, above the propaganda of the Western society and their mainstream media. If we can't convince our people, then our work is in vain. So we need to get this message out there, reaching many people. Therefore, money is an important tool. Again, remember, we're talking about tools. So thank you very much. If you have 2 shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have 2 trousers, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is in the mind, because if the mind is not free, your body is the tool that the oppressor will use to oppress you and oppress your people. So thank you very much, freedom and decolonization. See you next time, next week, for another episode on this topic, the tools of our liberation. Peace and power.